Ever feel low on energy when at home, even when you're doing everything right, like you're eating well, checking the labels, protecting your sleep? Well, maybe it's not you. Maybe it's your home and how it's positioned in relation to the sun. Now, most people never question this, but the sun has a direct impact on how our home performs, which in turn, it affects your biology and ultimately how your body functions every single day. Now, this is a really common layout type that we review for clients. It's got plenty of rooms, but not much else. What this kind of layout tends to lead to, it's stuffy air, rooms you avoid without thinking, and a home that tends to feel uncomfortable. And then over time, well, the house starts working against you and your well-being. So how do you design a home to get all of these three key inputs: daylight, airflow, and usable outdoor space with this orientation? Well, in this video, I'll show you how to approach it on a standard suburban block. And more importantly, I'll show you how to rethink the layout from first principles. To finish, I'll walk you through a resolved floor plan that turns this constraint into an advantage, so you can apply the same thinking to your own block. I'm Laszlo, Baranyay, an architect, and I help people understand how their home shapes how they feel and function, often without them realizing it. Now, let's start with the plan. So we can gather a lot of information from this floor plan just by looking at the overall shape. We don't have to look at it in too much detail at this point. And what we can see is the shape is very square. That is, the length and the width are roughly the same size. And that rings alarm bells straight away, because it typically results in this central area of the plan that, as you can see, will be very, very dark. It's very difficult to get daylight deep inside these type of floor plates. To make things worse, the house is built quite close to both the east and western boundaries, meaning daylight that enters these two side zones is also going to be heavily compromised because there's just not sufficient space for sunlight to get through. And to make matters worse, the outdoor space is located on the opposite side of where the sun's coming from. So that means all of this is going to be covered in shade too. So what this results in, it's a really dark home, both internally and externally. If a home is dark and depressing, you too will probably feel dark and depressed. The way I like to think about it, just like your computer or your phone needs to be updated regularly to maintain function, well, so does your body. Your body needs constant updates from the outdoor world, in particular from the sun, which helps to set our circadian rhythm, our body's master clock, which in turn affects mood, sleep, hormones. So it's critically important. And a house like this, you're not going to get any of that. And as far as airflow goes, you can probably see where this is going. If the airflow is from the side of the home, it's very difficult to get across 1, 2, 3 rooms. So you're not going to get this cross ventilation. And it's a breeding ground for CO2 buildup, allergens, and humidity, which obviously can lead to mold and a bunch of other health issues. And our front space, which is actually the one covered in sun, is just used as a buffer zone, which is quite typical in a suburban setting. So there's no real point in looking at this floor plan in any more detail. Let's just start again and look at it from first principles. So first thing we want to do is we want to understand our strengths and our weaknesses. Now that the sun is coming from the street end, and unlike if the sun is coming from your backyard, well, there's very little to overshadow your front garden space. Typically, your neighbors can't build too close to the front boundary, meaning there's a lot of room in front of your house and over the street for the sun to enter. One of the challenges is that the east and western neighbors, they tend to build typically close to or up to the boundary for cars and to maximize that width of their side. So our east and western aspect are heavily compromised. So if they're compromised, we don't want to be working against ourselves. The best thing to do is to stretch out our home and maximize the orientation that gets the most amount of sun. So we want our active spaces to be orientated to the sun. And if we allow an area for parking, it means we've got this area in here that we can play with for our living, kitchen, dining zone. So in terms of the rest zones, we don't want to continue the floor plan this way because that creates the same condition as we had before with the very square floor plan. Instead, what we can do is we can pinwheel the floor plan around one side. So we create 2 rectangular volumes that are very narrow. So we've got a lot of external wall relative to floor area. And what that means is we can allocate bedrooms along this eastern front that looks out to a main outdoor space in here. And in terms of the wet areas, well, we can put them along this western end where we do have compromised daylighting. So optimize light first for the active spaces, then the rest spaces, and then the wet areas. So the bedrooms are orientated east in this case. So we're getting that morning sun to set your circadian rhythm for the day. Perfect. And then we can also create multiple outdoor zones. So we've got one at the front, which I'll show you how to unlock soon, and then another one at the rear of this rest zone here, which we can access there. And that's the key of a good floor plan, to get as many touch points as you can from each room to the outdoor space, because you want to be connected to the outside world, because that's where we function best. So you might say, well, how do we actually use this front part of the site? Because it actually is the best part. And it feels like a wasted opportunity if we just give it back to the streetscape. So if I just draw a section through here, I'll show you just what this looks like. So if we look at this cross section where we got the street on one end, we've got the sun coming through up here, down over our site. This is the front boundary here. So what we want to manage is the privacy and security aspect to it. So what we want to do is we want to layer up that front garden space so that we can keep the sight lines looking out from your home into your front garden space, but manage the sight lines into your property. So what we do is we start with the most solid element on the street frontage. Either that's a fence or a screen that's quite solid and has very little visibility through it. Then what we can do is we can layer that up with some landscaping in front, with some shrubs, short, small trees and grasses and the like. Then we've got that open section in the middle that we can use, maybe some grasses along the edge of the home. Nothing too tall because you don't want to block those sight lines out. And what we find is this extra layer is really important to manage that privacy from your home. So we move the facade line in to create a semi-covered space with a framed element at the front. So now we've got this first layer here, we've got this second layer in the middle, third layer of the landscaping, and fourth layer of our fence. So the visibility through to your living zone is highly obscured, whereas the view out is very open. So let's see how this looks once we resolve the layout. So if we look at the front of the site first, so we can see how we've stretched out those living zones across the east and west sides to be able to maximize the sunlight coming into that kitchen, dining, living space. We've got this centralized entrance zone with our cloakroom with views directly out to our garden. Then we have our living, dining and kitchen zones. We've got the kitchen hard up against that eastern side where we're not going to get any daylight anyway. And we've got a patio both on the sunny side and on the main garden side. So we've got extra flexibility in terms of use. We incorporated that front fence and landscaped edge to be able to provide that private sense of privacy and security from the street while still having access to our main outdoor space. And then obviously we've got our double garage in this case. Most people are after a double garage with some additional storage and the like with a simple access through to your living zones. So now we've got a very open and generous living, kitchen, dining space. But I think what you can see here is how this house now starts to open up to the outdoors. I've got a couple of layouts to share, so stick with me if you prefer the compartmentalized arrangements. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 bedrooms with the master at the end, all which open out to our main outdoor space. Here, all orientated east with this corridor along the western end here, which keys into the wet areas such as the main bathroom and our master ensuite. And what we've also got here is an additional multi-purpose space, which we've called a study in this case, with an adjacent little cutout for a garden space. Because what you'll see is along each orientation, you've got direct connection to the outdoor world. So if you're coming from the living zones, walking down this corridor, you can see that there's a window along that edge. If you're coming down along this bedroom corridor, well, this will be still filled with sunlight. So there's no dead spots. And it also helps for airflow. So now we can get cross ventilation much more easily across this zone here through these bedrooms and also through the entranceway once you open all that up. So have a lot more fresh air, you'll feel a lot more alive, and most importantly, your biology will be able to function properly. And another important inclusion is this garden gallery section. You don't need to access the living space through the main internal corridor. You'd be much more inclined to step outside, which is exactly what we want. And you've got this framed sort of colonnade that frames up the views of your outdoor space. Be beautiful to step outside, walk across here and into your living zones rather than through the internal space, which is exactly what we want to do. And finally, we've got this garden retreat area at the back, straight off of the master bedroom. So at the moment, this is more of an open plan arrangement. Depending on your lifestyle preference, if you want something that's a bit more compartmentalized, we can dial that up quite easily. So we can add either a butler's pantry that connects into the kitchen, which ends up looking something like this. So if you want to get your hands on this layout along with the variations and try it out on your own block, you can get access to the high resolution 2-scale floor plan, so you can see how this approach works on your site before committing. Link below. We get our walk-in pantry in there, but then you can dial that up again. So what we've done here is we've taken the wall off the boundary, and we've reorganized the living, kitchen, dining space to create more of a compartmentalized version. So this area here, we have a centralized kitchen space with a generous walk-in pantry in behind for all the cooking and cleaning. And what we've also done is turned this living space around on the shady side, so that we can maximize light in through that area here. And then we've got plenty of glazing to the internal face to make sure we've got sufficient daylight into that zone. And what we've done is we've created this centralized courtyard zone that keys into our floor plan nicely, allows for that connection through from the front to the back still, as well as from the living space, and provides a centralized focal point and that connection to nature. So I haven't spoken about climate at this point. And yes, it's important, and the sun gets really hot, but it's also a critical input that we need for our biology to function properly. So we've got to get the priorities right when we design a home. The first priority is designed for us, what we actually need to function right. Then we can layer on top that climate layer. And it's actually really easy to block out the sun. Doesn't take a lot of skill. The skill is to manage both. So if we start with the first priority, getting a bio-responsive layout done first, then we can layer on top your specific climate conditions. So in this case, this is a fairly good layout for a location that has 4 seasons, where you've got the cooler winters and the hot summers, because you've got the retractable roofing over your patio space. You've got nice shallow floor plans that allow light in through the winter. The eastern light to the bedrooms is good year round. And then this western face with your living room zone, where you've got some cover from this potential deciduous tree in the middle of your courtyard space. If you live in more of an equatorial climate that has the year-round heat, well, then you can dial it up. You can increase the depth of the patio space. You can make it more permanent if you like. You can also add in shading devices along your garden gallery if you need to, or as well as creating a trellis with some vertical greenery. You can add a pergola structure over your courtyard space, and then you can even go to the extent of creating water features and the like around the home to cool the ambient air temperature around. There's heaps you can do. And it's very easy to do once you've got the basic setup of your house. I hope that gives you a different way to think about planning your own site, starting from first principles, with sun, air, and connection to outdoor space, especially if your block isn't ideally orientated. So let me know what you think, and if you've got a site or a layout that you would like to explore, drop it in the comments. Until next time.